The roots of the conflict trace back to the complicated history between Russia and Ukraine. Here are some key points. Soviet Union era. For much of the 20th century, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. However, Russia has continued to view Ukraine as part of its sphere of influence. Cultural and linguistic ties. Ukraine and Russia share historical, linguistic, and cultural connections, particularly in eastern Ukraine. Russia has often cited these ties to justify its influence in Ukraine's affairs. Geopolitical interests. Ukraine's location makes it a strategic buffer zone between Russia and Western Europe. For Russia, losing influence over Ukraine has been seen as a threat to its own security. Ukraine's path toward the West. After gaining independence, Ukraine faced a choice: align with Russia or the West. Over the years, Ukraine has shown a growing interest in Western alliances, which created tension with Russia. Here are some key points. EU and NATO aspirations. In the 2000s, many Ukrainians favored closer ties with the European Union and NATO. While Ukraine wasn't accepted as a NATO member, the prospect alone raised concerns for Russia. Orange Revolution 2004. After a disputed election in 2004, mass protests led to the Orange Revolution, which brought pro-Western leaders to power in Ukraine. The Euromaidan protests between 2013 and 2014. When Ukraine's then-president Viktor Yanukovych rejected an EU trade deal in favor of closer ties with Russia, massive protests broke out. This movement, known as Euromaidan, eventually led to Yanukovych's ousting and a shift toward pro-Western leadership in Ukraine. Russia's annexation of Crimea. Russia's response to Ukraine's pro-Western shift became visible in 2014 when it annexed Crimea, a region with deep Russian ties. After Yanukovych was ousted, Russia swiftly moved to annex Crimea, citing the need to protect ethnic Russians there. This was widely condemned as illegal by the international community. Justification of protecting Russian-speaking populations. Russia justified its actions as necessary to protect Russian-speaking populations and has used similar rhetoric in other parts of Ukraine. Impact on eastern Ukraine. Soon after, pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's Donbas region began fighting for independence. With support from Russia, this led to an ongoing conflict that would simmer for years, with attempts at ceasefires largely failing. Build up to 2022. Leading to 2022, a series of events escalated tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Here are some key points. Increasing NATO support for Ukraine. Although not a member, Ukraine began receiving military support, training, and equipment from NATO countries, which Russia saw as provocative. Putin's security concerns. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed concerns that NATO's presence near Russian borders would compromise Russia's security. Diplomatic tensions and ultimatums. In late 2021, Russia issued demands for NATO to stop expanding eastward, specifically blocking Ukraine from ever joining. These demands were rejected by NATO and the US. The immediate trigger. In early 2022, diplomatic solutions seemed out of reach and Russian troops began to gather near Ukraine's borders, leading to the invasion. Here are some key points. Troop buildup. Throughout 2021 and early 2022, Russia amassed tens of thousands of troops on Ukraine's borders, raising alarm worldwide. Final attempts at diplomacy. Despite last-minute attempts to negotiate, the talks ultimately failed. Russia stated that it was acting in response to what it saw as an unacceptable security threat. Invasion of Ukraine. February 2022. On the 24th of February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, sparking the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II. Broader implications and Russia's goals. To understand why Russia ultimately made this decision, it's essential to look at Putin's broader goals. Here are some key points. Reasserting regional dominance. Many analysts believe Putin aimed to reassert Russian dominance over former Soviet territories and to restore what he sees as Russia's rightful influence in the region. Undermining NATO's influence. By invading Ukraine, Putin may have hoped to discourage NATO expansion and to set an example to other nearby countries considering Western alignment. Some experts also suggest that this aggressive move could be partly to rally nationalistic support within Russia and to solidify Putin's legacy. The war in Ukraine has roots in decades of complex history, cultural ties, and conflicting national interests. While it's a tragedy with devastating human costs, understanding the factors behind it can help us see the bigger picture of global geopolitics.